The Water Wars, Chapter 2. That night, Will and I stayed up late. Will had dragged his mattress across the hallway to my room, where it rested on a couple of wooden crates our father had salvaged from a food drop. The two beds made a kind of giant spongy stair. I was on the top step, and Will was one below. We had two covers, both of which I tugged more closely around me. Will complained, but he gave up as soon as I told him about Kai. "He must be rich," Will concluded. "He is," I said. "And Will—" I waited until I had his complete attention. "After the bus came, they picked him up in a limo." "Who picked him up?" "I don't know. There was a guard with a gun." Will squinted with his left eye. I always thought it was unfair that I got our mother's freckles, while Will had our father's witch hazel eyes, pinwheels of green, gray, and gold. When he squinted, it was like peering into the glass end of a kaleidoscope. "His father must be WAB minister, maybe." "There are no WABs here," I reminded him. "He could live in Basin." "Then why would he be out walking on a road?" I asked. If the boy's father were on the Water Authority Board, he wouldn't live in the Wellington Pavilion, as nice as it was, and he wouldn't be outside walking. There was a place a lot nicer and a lot more expensive with better security. Most of the WAB ministers lived in Basin, the capital, about 60 kilometers away. The Water Authority controlled the flow and distribution of water and was the closest thing we had to an actual government. Our republic, Illinois, was all that remained of the Midwestern pieces of the old United States, and the only thing left to govern was water. The decisions made by the WABs in Basin could mean life or death for the rest of us. I'd never been to the city, but photographs showed leafy trees growing from beneath semi-porous grates and real grass in the park. Everything seemed to be breathing, and the air was gauzy with moisture. "He must live around here," I decided. "He says he does. We should invite him to dinner." "We don't have any food." "That's not true. Synth food's not food," said Will, "and Dad's a terrible cook." "He doesn't have time to make a real meal." I hated when Will criticized our father's cooking. "Anyway, I don't mind synth steak." It was months since we had eaten anything except the synthetic food the Water Authority Board provided us in weekly food drops. It claimed it tasted like the real thing, but of course it didn't. Everything had a sort of bland sameness. Steak tasted like chicken, orange juice tasted like tomato juice. The only differences were the colors and textures. Still, people could get used to anything, and we did. If Kai was rich, he didn't act like it. Rich people lived in secure compounds with guards and robodogs and rarely left their buildings. When they did, they wore Kev jackets on the streets and carried laser tasers or guns. In Basin, they were permitted to shoot first if a stranger approached without identification. Even in Arch, where we lived, the occasional businessman was ferried about in an armored vehicle. You can never be too safe or too protected. That's what our teacher said. Men would kill for a glass of water, and did. Will and I talked until the power grid shut down and the lights flickered and then went dark. He had a small glow light, but it wasn't fully charged or bright enough for both of us to read by. The darkness settled. I felt myself growing weightless, thoughts flitting half-formed through my mind, pieces of one thing replaced by endings of another. I knew sleep was coming. In my dreams, Kai offered me plastine cups filled with water, but I couldn't drink them fast enough. The water tasted like graphite and made my mouth dry. I tried to tell him to stop, but he kept offering them and spilling what I couldn't drink on the ground. When I awoke, my blanket was bunched around my neck and my hair was damp with sweat. Will was already downstairs, dry showered, and eating a bowl of Oreos in front of the wireless. I skipped the shower and grabbed a toasty bar as our father ushered us to the door. "No time for texting," he said. I reached for a controller on the kitchen table. "Signal's out anyway," said Will. The wireless played a news feed about a pirate attack, and Will also had a couple of game channels open, but the wide text screen was down. My father had explained that bandwidth and signal strength varied depending on the grid, but it didn't seem a coincidence that propaganda and entertainment were always easiest to find, while communications were more difficult. You could play U2 almost anywhere in the world, but sending a simple message across republics was unpredictable and sometimes impossible. I hurried to find Will and barely had time to finish my breakfast because he walked so fast. We didn't see Kai at the bus stop. We waited until the last possible minute, staring down the road in the hope that he would materialize out of the dust. Then the driver barked for us to get on board, and we scampered up the steps. The ride to school was agonizingly slow and bumpy. Though it was fall, it felt like summer, and the bus was hot and airless even with the windows cracked open. My lips were chapped, and I was thirsty already, but of course there was nothing to drink, and there wouldn't be anything until lunchtime. I licked my lips and plunged into the pages on my screen, where the seas were always blue and the skies heavy with thunder. Our school was a one-story cinder block building that looked as if it had once been larger. At each end, the hallways simply stopped and were bricked off without windows or doors. The classrooms were overcrowded, and there wasn't enough space in the gym or lunchroom for everyone to play or eat at the same time. Fortunately, on most days, 1/4 of the kids were sick or absent, which meant the school was nearly the right size for the rest of us. At least there were enough chairs in my class for everyone to find a seat. The school's venti unit blew at full power. I could feel the air coursing over my head like a current as I walked down the hallway. It was crackly and dry, alive with static electricity. The unit was supposed to filter dirt and chemicals, but it made the air taste like something metallic. The teachers kept the windows open anyway because the school was so hot. I found my class and sat at my usual seat near the window. The other kids chatted noisily and tossed things at each other while I opened my screen and adjusted my pen writer. A boy named Rarik tried to get my attention by tapping my shoulder with a calculating stick. He had hair that stuck up like a toilet brush. I ignored him. When the teacher arrived, Rarik sat back quickly in his seat and the class quieted down. No one dared aggravate the teachers, who freely dispensed electric zaps with a battery-powered teacher's aid. We were doing a unit on weather. Mrs. Delfina used her laser pencil to show how the jet stream carried storm systems from west to east. Variations in Earth's temperature made the jet stream dip and twist, curving north when it should be headed east. This made it snow where it should be warm and brought rain to the colder regions. Predicting weather, she said, was more an art than science, because you had to take into account the changing temperature of the land and water and the competing forces of high and low pressure systems that jockeyed for position over the continent. Even the slightest variation could wreak enormous havoc. A butterfly beating its wings over Basin today, Mrs. D said, can change tomorrow's weather 2,000 kilometers away. I pictured a butterfly floating in the jet stream, beating its wings furiously to stay aloft, and moving just enough air to storm clouds, so storm clouds could travel north instead of south. It was difficult to imagine, although I knew men changed the weather with giant airplanes that seeded the clouds for rain and enormous turbines that sucked the moisture from the sky. Most days we awoke with storm clouds on the horizon, only to see the sky transformed into a brilliant, piercing blue. What's the most important thing we can do to protect our weather? Mrs. D said. Guard the earth and sky, we answered in unison. Mrs. Delfina smiled. Her teeth were large and white and looked nearly perfect. In fact, I knew they were not real. I had seen her once in the bathroom, with her teeth on the side of the sink, her mouth open, hollow and empty. Teeth were the first things that went bad, and most shakers had to make do with fake ones. Mrs. D was lucky she could afford them. There were plenty who could not. When we finished morning lessons, there was lunch, which we ate in the cafeteria. The school had stopped providing hot lunch several weeks ago. Now most kids brought lunch from home. I traded my Cheez-Yos to another girl for an extra soy milk. Nearby, a group of boys tossed packs of dried veggies at each other. I looked around for Will, but didn't see him. I drank the first milk, then the second. And still I was thirsty, but there would be no more until dinner, so I forced my lips shut and tried to think about something else.